Oh yeah, God is good.
Welcome to the Coffee and Clay podcast. This is your host, John Pham, and our producer, Jason Lee. Here at Coffee and Clay, our goal is to showcase the humanity of Christ's church here on earth. We do this by storytelling and having genuine human conversations, all while sharing a cup of coffee. Both Jason and I, we're not theologians, not spiritually gifted. We're just ordinary Christian guys who love coffee and want to glorify His kingdom. So sit back, relax, grab a cup, and remember that God is good. Welcome back to another episode of the Coffee and Clay podcast. This week we have on John Thai Nguyen. John, he's my godfather. He's my sponsor, my confirmation sponsor. He's also a youth group leader at the Vietnamese Eucharistic Youth Movement. Sorry, that's a mouthful. And he's also a longtime friend and mentor. He's known me since I was 5 years old. He's had a great impact in my life, and it's an honor to have him here on the show today.
Thanks for having me on. I feel a little bit weird and embarrassed, but we'll try to get through this.
Oh, no, you're a natural one, John. But that's just so... It's funny because both John and I, and I'll preface this too, I'll call him John throughout the show. So in Vietnamese culture, An means older brother. And in our youth group and kind of how I grew up, we don't call each other by our first names. Like if someone's older, we always call each other by like older brother, older sister, younger brother, younger sister. So John, he was my youth group leader. I knew him since I was a kid. And so I always call him John, means like he's my older brother. So if you guys are hearing that throughout the show, let's know that that's what I'm referencing. So, yeah, both John and I were big Denver Broncos fans. And with the Super Bowl coming up, it's kind of painful because the Patriots beat the Broncos to get into the Super Bowl. So I'm still like kind of hurt. Like every time I see the Patriots, my blood boils. And like it's just like with Tom Brady dominating for that many years and them, not being very good for like 4 years and all of a sudden they're back, it irks me.
I don't think they beat the Broncos. I think the Broncos beat themselves, with poor play calling and not adjusting to the weather. We lost the game, man.
It's just 'cause
they didn't beat us.
Our defense dominated for sure. But yeah, I think at the end of the day I think we just didn't adjust to the weather, like you were saying. Mm-hmm. It's just like that shovel pass. It will haunt me to
two shovel passes.
Two shovel passes, yeah. It just haunts me to this. And again, I'm sitting on my couch at home, like judging someone else playing sports, but I'm like, this guy's getting paid $15 million a year to do this. A shovel pass,
two-handed shovel passes.
It hurts me because again, I was saying before, I have this hatred for the Patriots because we oftentimes see them in the playoffs and we lose, and then we've beat them a handful of times, like in 2015 to win the Super Bowl. We beat them in the AFC Championship, but to lose to them again and only having them not be very good for like 2 or 3 years, I don't know. Like I'm cheering for the Seahawks. And I'm like, hey, just dominate them. Like make up for, what was it, the 2022 Super Bowl, something like that, where they lost by that interception, whatever.
Yeah. I'm
like, make up for it. Just stomp them into the ground.
I think they'll stomp them.
Yeah.
It's not going to be close. Yeah. Seattle's a pretty well-rounded team from top to bottom. And so all of their whatever they've built up with John Schneider is because of Russell Wilson. So you're welcome, Seahawks fans. All your draft picks came from that trade. You built up this amazing young group of talent, special teams, defense, all that. That's because of the Russell Wilson trade. So I feel like we're part of it in some way. And so you're welcome, Seattle. Enjoy your Super Bowl parade. We took on Russell Wilson and his $58 million in dead cap money for you guys. So enjoy.
Yeah, and sorry for all of our listeners out there who don't follow football and don't track football as much. And John and I just love football, and I think that's part of we grew up bonding a lot with each other. I remember at his house we watched one of these Broncos playoff games with Peyton Manning, and it was the Ravens Broncos game, and it was again, sub-freezing temperatures, and we were about to win the thing. Yeah. Last-minute Hail Mary from Joe Flacco, and I still remember sitting in your living room, and I was in shock, and I was so angry. I'm like, how can this be? Why do I want to hurt myself over and over and over again over this? So thank you, but also on football, I think it's kind of cool to see like more people coming out and really saying, giving glory to God and after the game. Might be the cool thing to do nowadays. I'm not sure, but like especially in college, like everyone's giving glory to God. Especially like I think it's cool is like
Fernando Mendoza.
oh my goodness, yeah.
Heisman winning quarterback, #1 overall.
Yeah, I don't know.
Draft pick,
I sit there, I'm like, I feel bad because he's going to go to the Raiders and he's going to be terrible. It's going to be really bad for him. But I'm just like, I have hope. I'm like, man, like it's cool to see like a young, well-rounded, good Christian guy, and just him kind of having to work at something so hard, but being so focused, but also remembering who he is the Son of God, and like glorifying God no matter where he's at. And I know a lot of guys like give him grief for it and give him crap for it for being so Christian and whatnot. But I don't know. I think it's refreshing, to be honest. I think it's like he's not being scared about it, and he's really just, using that platform to glorify God and show it with his play and his. I just seen him get hit so hard. Like, in some of these games I watch, he just gets nailed to the ground and comes out with a bloody lip, but he keeps enduring. And I'm like, man, like, if I took a hit like that, I'd be out. I'm like, take me out, coach. I'm done.
No, I've noticed that mainstream media, they've tried to cut it out. Like last year when CJ Stroud won his first playoff game, I think it was, NBC cut off the part where he glorified God.
Yeah.
And so I saw clips on Facebook about how liberal media has started to cut it off. Like they'll cut snippets. So if you say I glorify God first, they'll cut it off in the beginning, or at the end when they say, "Hey, all glory is to God," they cut it off. And so I've noticed, certain media outlets, are sometimes left leaning, sometimes right leaning, and so they have an agenda, and I've seen it firsthand. And so it's just something to kind of pay attention to, because they'll literally cut you off.
Yeah.
And they don't want you to say those things on their so-called left-leaning media.
It's interesting because I don't know, like, how is saying glory to God something controversial? And
it's very controversial.
And now
just
it's
saying Merry Christmas is controversial.
Yeah, and it's just so interesting to me because, like, growing up, when we did the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Right? Indivisible, under God, right? That was something that was a part of our culture, our DNA. And growing up, that was something we just said every day at school. But now it's like, God is like nope, we can't say that. That's like, it's not, you're not representing all the other religions and whatnot. I'm like, but like, that's something that our country's been fundamentally founded on. So it's very interesting to see nowadays. But I'm just glad that I think I'm seeing a lot more young men come back, and that's the young women too, come back to that and say, hey, no, like, we have to look back on like where we come from and who we are. I also know, did you watch the national championship game between Indiana and Miami?
Yeah.
I think one of the most beautiful things was his dad and his mom, because for the whole time I saw his mom just like sitting there. She was cheering, but she wouldn't stand up. She wasn't like, she didn't look as animated as a mom would be. Like she was just kind of sitting there, and she was just like being happy, but she couldn't move much. And I didn't know her mom had MS. And so I was sitting there like, why is that? And then just seeing his dad kind of like wanting to stand up and like, just like, pump his fist and like go crazy. But like, he made sure to refrain himself and celebrate with his mom, like with his wife. And I was like, what's going on? And then I learned that, his mom has MS. That was such a powerful testimony of like how Fernando was raised. And I think as a father and as a husband, who that man was, his dad was, just, in the biggest moment of their son's, one of the biggest moments in the son's life, where they've kind of invested so much money, time, and effort into, but like making sure that him celebrating with his wife, that's such a very beautiful, beautiful testament. And I look at that, I'm like, hopefully I can do that one day. I have a lot of moments of short falling for sure. I get excited about football and I just leave my wife in the dust.
No, it goes back to this, like, I've seen, clips and people saying that if you want to build the best family, you have to focus on each other instead of your children. And so I think it's a bit of a shock at first. And so in your marriage, people have come out and said that you should focus on each other, the husband and the wife first. And so that should be your priority. And I think in that moment, instead of cheering on your son to, be on the highest stage of his life, they focused on each other. And so it makes perfect sense to me. It's kind of shocking. People are like, oh, you don't care about your children. No, that's not it. The thing is, like, if you don't focus and care about each other, then how can that kind of spill over? You're laying down, good roots, focusing on your marriage. And I think maybe that's part of the problem in our culture. And the high divorce rate is that we always focus on our children's accomplishments. And then we, as husband and wife, kind of just leave each other out of it. And so you become kind of second fiddle to your children. And it was nice to see that, like I read an article saying that Fernando Sr., Dr. Mendoza, he doesn't stand because he doesn't want to alienate his wife because she's in a wheelchair. And so that's just incredibly touching to me. But it just goes back to that adage that you should build your family on, your holy family through your marriage first, and then it kind of like spills over to your children. And so, great example. I really liked it.
Yeah, and it's touching to see, like, as we kind of moving forward, just seeing more examples of that, and just kind of seeing families just be more open about faith life. Because like I remember like there was always like good Christian players, or like for like me, I was like, oh, there's a handful of Catholics out there, like Philip Rivers. All right, I hated Philip Rivers. Like him and his like 12 kids or something like that. I hated Phil Rivers because I was a Broncos fan. He was a Chargers quarterback, but he was a good Catholic man. But I don't know. Like I think back in the days, I never really heard about it. Him being Catholic, him being a good Christian man, him having those family values. But I think now with so much going on, I think people are trying to step out of the woodworks more and be like, hey, like no, like I'm proud of this. Like this is part of our identity. This is who we are. So very beautiful. And so moving on to another thing about like just a physical feat of accomplishment. And John, you've lost a lot of weight. I'm so impressed. I'm so like I remember seeing pictures of you like on Facebook, and I was like, man, who is this guy? And I realized, that's John. That's my godfather. Holy crap! And I'm sitting there. I'm like, man, like that's awesome. Like and to see it in person, I'm just so like impressed. And so amazed by like, the dedication and the hard work you've put into it. Like, it's just like you've transformed to someone brand new. And so like, I just wanted to mention here, like, that's like awesome physical feat. And like, if you don't mind me, like, what was kind of the impetus of like you going through this, and like, what was the programming?
So I have 4 kids. And so I have 2 boys and 2 girls. And I sat around one day and I was like, you know what, I really want to walk my daughters down the aisle. And so like culture these days is, we focus on career first and then family later. And so my health was declining, and I didn't know if I was going to be around that long to walk at least one of my daughters down the aisle. And so I decided to make a change, and I found this guy on YouTube. His name is Ken Berry, Dr. Ken Berry.
Okay.
And I guess it's just YouTube's algorithm. Who knows? But he kind of like spoke to me, and he endorses this diet called the carnivore diet. And so I was like, so I don't have to fast. I don't have to go on it's a restriction, but not a diet. And so he was like, all you do is eat meat and as much as you want, and you'll lose weight. And I'm like, no, that can't be true. Stop.
You telling me a steak a day? And all the meat I want, and I lose weight? No, stop.
It worked. And then, like I've gotten labs done regularly. My doctor said, don't do it. She said that you will die of a heart attack. And 6 months later, I'm still here, down 80 pounds, and all I eat is meat. So I cut out carbs, I cut out sugar, just basically anything that used to walk, I'll eat it. And so my labs look good, my cholesterol is a little bit high, and so instead of steak, I switched to a leaner kind of meat. But even like Dr. Berry, he said that, even if you have high cholesterol, that's because your body created it. It's not necessarily a byproduct of what you eat. And so, but I switched anyway just to make my doctor happy. So my cholesterol went down. I literally melted 80 pounds in 6 months, and it wasn't really that hard. I mean, I love eating meat anyway, and so the only thing I miss is like rice, like
A good
croissants.
staple. Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I miss it a little bit, but then I look in the mirror and I'm like, that was worth it. I'll just go have a T-bone steak and eat as much as I want.
Uh-huh.
Labs are good. Energy is good. I feel good. I snore less. I have less inflammation. Like my teeth are healthy, but I would always get bloody gums for some reason. Like I didn't have like periodontal disease or anything like that. And so if I brush hard or if I flossed hard, just inflammation, blood. But for some reason, not eating carbohydrates and sugar, it limited inflammation in my body. And so like I floss, I go ham on my teeth and no blood. I snore less, like good energy, lost weight, blood pressure went down, all because of unlimited steak. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing ever. I'm like, I don't understand why people don't do this.
You found a biohack.
Yeah. Like it's literally, he said, eat when you're hungry and then stop eating when you're full. And so it was just, okay, cool. Chicken, beef, pork, seafood's included in it. So like Lent, I'm not missing out on anything. And so it's just, the calories and the fat just melted right off.
Wow. Well, again, I'm super proud of you and John. I think that's something that's really beautiful, and it's not hard. It's not easy to do. It's hard to do, and it takes like commitment, and like it takes like a desire and like just a continual everyday grind to get through that. So that's awesome. I've been through weight loss myself. I've gained it back. But I still remember like just looking at a piece of bread and I'm like, oh man, like I feel like it's talking to me and it's like, oh, eat me. I'm like, no.
Like I live down the street from a French bakery.
Oh.
And sometimes I drive by and I can smell what they're baking
Through the car.
Yeah. And it's torture. It's just torture.
And also one more thing too, I gotta bring up. Your prosthetic eye looks pretty badass.
Oh,
it's if you guys don't see on camera, he has a blacked out prosthetic eye in your right eye, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you go like a little bit and like how you got to the prosthetic eye?
Yeah. So when I was a kid, my aunt, she went to my dad and said that, John, you have a tiger eye. And so it ended up being a tumor that was growing inside my retina. And so I had cancer and my eye had to be removed because it would have spread and I wouldn't be here today. And so growing up, I've always had a prosthetic eye. And so it's always been something that I've been kind of ashamed of ever since I was a kid. And so being at our church and being a youth group leader gave me the confidence. And so I always tell the kiddos in my class that if it wasn't for our church, I wouldn't be the man you see today. And so it gave me the confidence because if I can stand in front of a quote unquote classroom at church in front of 50 wild teenagers, and if I can do this, then there's nothing I can't do in life. And so it really boosted my confidence. And now I'm not ashamed of it, and I went to a convention. I'm not sure if it's a convention, but a conference. It's called World Eye Cancer Day. And so I got to meet people from all over the world who've had cancer, cancer survivors. And most of my life, I've always been kind of ashamed and just angry at God. And I was like, what kind of God tries to kill a child, So I've carried this like burden my entire life of just blaming other people for things. And so it was, pun intended, eye-opening, but to see hundreds of people that have survived cancer, just like I have. And I've been lucky, quote unquote lucky, that it didn't spread. And so I've met other people that it did spread. And so Some people have lost both of their eyes. Sometimes it spreads to your brain. People have died from it. I've met parents that their kids died from it. And so they were just incredibly happy to see somebody who, quote unquote, made it. And so I guess life is always about perspective, you know? And so sometimes if you don't see that perspective, then that's all you think. That's all that the wisdom and the knowledge that you have is just that. But luckily, it met people from all over the world, and I feel lucky for the first time in my life, and I'm like, yeah, I spent most of my childhood just angry and just spiteful, and why did God try to kill me? This pain that I've held with me for such a long time. And so, but meeting others, cancer survivors, kind of brought to light that, you know what, maybe I am lucky, you know? And so actually, no, not maybe, I am. I lived, it only took one of my eyes, and so other people, they're not so unfortunate. And so it brought me out of my shell. And so, yeah, I keep in contact. We meet every year. Last year was in Hawaii. And so,
Oh, nice.
yeah, I met some of the same people. And it's run by terrific people, all cancer survivors. And so I'm in a little Facebook group of people. We call ourselves the party eye wearers. And so instead of just being ashamed and being hurt and just resentful, people just embrace it now. And so I think I was telling you earlier, like I have a glow in the dark prosthetic eye. I have a Terminator one. And then my son, who's into dinosaurs now, I have a Velociraptor eye. And so my kids get a big kick out of it. And so, no longer ashamed, no longer blaming God for all my problems. And just living life, loving it.
Yeah, I just gotta say, it's pretty badass. Like the blackout,
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even notice. It took me like a second look. Like, oh, that's a little different. Growing up, I didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
I just always thought like you had a lazy eye or something like that.
Yeah.
But I never knew. And I was like, oh, that's just and John. But I never knew. And so it's cool just to kind of hear the background story of it and see it now and like see you change it. I'm like, this is awesome. I kind of wish when I had an eye infection, I had pink eye, I told my wife, if I lose my eye, just take it out. I want an eye patch. I want an eye patch. I want a blackout prosthetic or something like that. I just again, it's equivalent to the man cold. Whenever I get cold, I get sick, or the flu, or something like that, or I just end the world. But anyways, that's a different story.
Yeah, I wanted to give a little shout out to Walter. He is they call them ocularists, so
Okay.
people that design ocular prosthetics. So Walter just retired. He lost his eye in a hockey accident when he was 8 years old, and so he's been making prosthetics ever since. Him and his brother, out of Lone Tree. And he retired, and I think he moved back to New York, where he's from. So want to thank Walter for all of his work. Whenever I went into his office, he'd have letters of people from all different walks of life thanking him for the absolute gorgeous prosthetics he made to kind of hold people back together, you know, from cancer to accidents to all sorts of other diseases that he's helped. And so he spent, the latter portion of his life trying to help people. And I wrote him a letter, and I hope he kept it. And so here's to you, Walter. Enjoy retirement, and thanks for all you've done.
That's beautiful. Yeah. So just moving into our interview for today, and I think the topic we really want to focus on is just kind of like the Vietnam War, its impact on the Vietnamese American community here in the United States, and more specifically, what we can talk about is the community here in Denver. I know that, again, like you and I both grew up at the Vietnamese church parish here in Denver, the Queen of Vietnamese Martyrs. We spent majority of our lives there, making lifelong friends there, spending countless amount of hours volunteering, just building friendships and memories there. But I think that all just stemmed from a really big event that happened that pushed a lot of our families and our loved ones and parents before us out of their home country and brought us here. So I just want to talk a little bit about that today, kind of go over like the war itself, because I know that one of the most impactful things that happened to me as when I was going through youth group was when you were my youth group leader. You sat us down and you had this presentation for us, and it really opened my eyes a little bit, because growing up in the United States, I never thought about it. I was like, oh, I'm going to school. Like, I know nothing about like where my parents came from. Never understood what the war was. Never understood the hardship, and my parents were always working, trying to make sure I had a good, like upraising, had money, had food, lived in a good area. I never really thought about those things. And just for you, someone who's also a first generation American like me, immigrant American like me, just to tell the story again and bring it back was really impactful. So I wanted you on here today because you just have so much insight. You've done so much research on it, and you kind of can talk about it. And I think the issue with a lot of generations that immigrated over here, it's sometimes that language barrier. It makes it hard for them to share. And I remember growing up, my grandma would never talk about it. Like a lot of the older generation would never talk about it. My parents would rarely talk about it. And I think it's just that communication barrier. But to have someone who's bilingual kind of can understand more and can like live more recently to that and explain someone younger like myself, I think is really impactful. So I'm looking forward to this conversation today. So I think to start off here, and John, can you just kind of go into a little bit like your family background first, like where your family's from in Vietnam, and when they came over, and then, what's that story like?
Yeah. So, both my parents' family, we are from the north side of Vietnam. And so, I think it was after the Treaty of Versailles where Vietnam was basically cut in half. And so in 1954, they had a referendum, and then you got to choose where you wanted to live. And so literally split into two countries, so North Vietnam and South Vietnam. And so in 1954, they gave you the option of where you would like to live. And so my family being of Catholic descent, they were persecuted. And so their land, property, title, all of their money was taken away. And so from like the Vietnamese perspective, most people didn't like the French. And so French brought amazing things like coffee and cheese,
bread
to Vietnam, and amazing things too. But they also brought Christianity over. And so a lot of people thought that was kind of a threat. It was like a Western kind of thing. And so anyone that was associated with Catholicism or Christianity was considered kind of like a traitor. You're a Westerner. You're not part of Vietnamese culture and the Asian culture. You're just, most people thought you were a spy. You were a spy for the West. And so they literally took everything from you. And so including my family as well. And so in 1954, my mom's side and my dad's side decided to immigrate to the South. And so literally my dad's side just got up and walked.
Wow.
And, they eventually purchased transportation and things like that. But there was a mass migration of literally millions of people that wanted freedom, that didn't want to live in a communist type of government.
Yeah. And so in 1954, so the North under Ho Chi Minh became communist, right? It was under the communist regime as they're kicking out the French after that. And then there's the mass migration down from there as that happened afterwards then. And so, yeah, it's always interesting because at church, I always like listened to when the older people were talking, they were always like, oh, you're a northerner, like back means north in Vietnamese, but it's like, oh, you're a northerner from 75 or 54. The two different time frames. And so like when would you come down? And so they could always tell the difference between the two, and they always asked each other. So I always hear the 54 northerner, and I was like, oh, that's why that event happened where everyone started coming down after that.
Yeah. So my mom's side and my dad's side both ended up in Saigon,
Okay.
and so from 1954 till 1975, and so my dad actually he entered seminary at the age of 12, and so April 30th, 1975, Ho Chi Minh in the north decided to break their treaty, and so they decided to invade South Vietnam into what they would call is reunification of the country. And so at that time, my dad, I think he was like 24 at the time, and so he was in seminary. And in the middle of the night, my grandparents came and got him and pulled him out.
Wow.
And said, "We're leaving." He didn't want to leave. He was in his 20s. He wanted to become a priest. And so I always joke around that I have to thank Ho Chi Minh because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be born. But people that immigrated here, they don't really appreciate him for his nationalistic views on government. And so he was pulled out. My cousin was a pilot in the Southern Vietnamese Army, and so basically April 30th, 1975, it's utter chaos and collapse. Basically, the South had lost the war, and people were abandoning their posts. It was just absolute chaos, and so my cousin decided to sneak onto the base and steal a helicopter in the middle of the night. Yeah. So he was a pilot, and so he flew to the our local church. He landed on the roof, and then he started to cram as many family members as we could into a helicopter that he had just stolen. And so, including my dad and my grandparents, and so they all just kind of crammed in there, and they flew. And so apparently they flew, and then they had to refuel, and then they had absolutely no idea or plan what they were going to do. And so by the absolute stroke and luck and the grace of God, they found a U.S. aircraft carrier called the USS Midway. And so they approached the aircraft carrier, and apparently people on the ship tried to radio them and to tell them to go away. And so nobody spoke English. And so they scrambled fighter jets to blow them up. And so, because they didn't know who they were or what they were about. And so, because nobody spoke English either. And so I think my aunt had the crazy idea of like, we should wave like white flags outside the window. And predominantly people didn't have like white flags on the ship, on the helicopter, except for underwear. And so a bunch of my cousins decided to de-pants, and then they were just waving white underwear outside the window. And luckily, I'm not of military background, but in all the movies I've seen, there's always some guy on the deck with binoculars. And so apparently they saw the white flags. Nobody responded to the radio communications. And so by, again, the love and grace of God, that admiral on the USS Midway decided not to blow my family up. And so they allowed them to land on the USS Midway. My dad told me that they were approached by MPs with M16 rifles because they didn't know who they were. And so apparently on every ship, there's a jail. And so,
so they were in jail.
They were jailed because they didn't know if they were
Viet Cong or
plus nobody spoke English.
Okay.
And so a bunch of band of refugees, but apparently on a ship, the jail is only like this big, like an 8x10 cell. And so they managed to cram in like 16 members of my family into this small jail.
Wow.
On the USS Midway. And so eventually they got a translator, and they told them their story, and they verified my cousin's, military credentials. And we were not part of the North. And so they were all let out of jail. They were given meals, treated incredibly very well. They saw the doctors on the ship. And so eventually there was like a merchant ship that was passing by, and they accepted refugees, and so they were transported onto a merchant ship, and then they were transported to the island of Guam. And so I'm a little fuzzy on history, but I think during that time that Americans let refugees into the country only if you were sponsored by an American family. And so Sergeant Sergeant Stearns, I forget his first name, I'm sorry, but his family out of Colorado Springs, Colorado, decided to sponsor my family. And so my family got flown out from Guam to Colorado Springs, and so that started my dad's journey to America. My mom's was a little bit different. Her family booked passage to the Philippines on a ship, and so her story of coming to America was a little bit less uneventful. But again, they stayed in a refugee camp in the Philippines until an army doctor from Lakewood, Colorado, decided to sponsor my family, and so that's how they came to America. My parents met in America, and so that's how they met. And so that's kind of my family's journey to America.
Okay. And then, so your parents met over here, and then they had you a
Yep.
couple of years later. And then, so you were first generation American soil.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. It's always interesting because that story about the helicopter thing is so similar to my dad's story. Because my dad was like, his brother was he was in the army, he was military police, but he had a friend and he was a GI. I said, hey, come to this building, right, at this time, or else you're stuck here. Bring your whole family. And so my dad's older brother was in love with a girl. And so as they're getting on this helicopter, one of the last helicopters out of Saigon, like you see the picture of the embassy or something like that, like everyone just reaching up, that picture, they were in the building like a couple blocks down. And the same thing was happening though. And he was just like, at that moment where his older brother decided to say, I'm not going. Like, I'm not getting on this airplane because I'm not on this helicopter because I love this girl. And all my dad and all his brothers like, no, you're coming with us. You cannot stay here. You're going to die. My grandma was crying. My grandfather was crying. And then they finally grabbed him, pulled him onto the helicopter, and they left against his will. But
Probably the best decision they've
oh yeah, and he's happily married, not with that girl now back here over in the United States. But it's just so interesting to hear that perspective and hear the different stories of everyone how they got here. And so, from your what was it like for you growing up here as a first generation American? I know that I've talked to some other people about it from like other countries, but just for us, our family coming from a war torn country. And us going to school, being a first generation American here, we were raised one thing, like we were raised one way at home, but then it was completely different at like school or everywhere else. So what was it like for you?
Yeah, it was an interesting process. Just like a hybrid car, I've always felt like my upbringing was just like a Prius, part battery and then part naturally aspirated gasoline engine. And so it was an interesting experience. It was like you're basically living two different lives, and so like just for an example, like my parents, they believe in physical discipline, and so you'd have to not tell all of your white friends at school that your parents hate you and you got spanked, and they just wouldn't understand, And so I really love the comedian Russell Peters. He's of Indian descent, and so he kind of brought it to light. And so, most people are kind of understand that, on the other side of the world, they do things differently. And so, that was a big kind of culture shock, just living the hybrid life, sometimes switching from gasoline to electric powered, and it was, I wouldn't say it was difficult. I enjoyed the experience actually. And so, as a father of kids now, I've taken bits and pieces of what I like about both things. And so like, I won't completely discount or take away my Vietnamese culture and heritage, but there are things I don't like. And so, like spanking my kids for fun, I don't do that. And out of anger and spite, I don't do that. Um, but I also like the Vietnamese culture, like respecting your elders, having, a healthy respect for your ancestors, people that are older than you, things like that. And so I've taken bits and pieces, and the same thing for the American culture as well. And so I've given my kids the hybrid experience as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so I think with a lot of kids growing up and during, especially kids with my age, they didn't adjust to it well. And so, especially if you were born in a different country and you came here, it was tough for certain people. And so, like growing up, we'd have a group of friends that were American born, and then we had a group of friends that were Vietnamese born. And so, um, I always people think that it's kind of crazy, but I've always wanted to be part of both groups. And so, um, the kids that were born in Vietnam, they came over later, they were kind of outcasted and they were thought of differently and they were thought of kind of lesser. But for me, I actually wanted to be friends with them and they would never let me in their little circle of friends. And so mainly because of the language barrier. And so like my Vietnamese is really good now, but back then it was pretty broken and I couldn't communicate well. And so I always tell there's an expression in Vietnam for like people that are older and they talk down to people. They call it "mai." So "mai" means it's an insult. And so growing up, if your parents called you that, that basically means that you're in trouble.
Oh yeah.
Okay, it's like "mai sắp bị ăn đòn." Okay, it's like that's my.
You're about to be punished.
Yeah, my dad was like, "I'm gonna whoop your ass. Okay? You've done something wrong," and so that literally means "my" is you, sắp ăn đòn. Okay, is that you're about to eat some punishment. And so, but the thing is, like, it's also kind of a term of endearment now, is for the younger folks, is to be called "my." And so I think it's kind of like a newer, like hip lingo is to call your friends or your siblings that. And so they took a term that was derogatory and then they turned it into something that's hip and cool now. And so this may sound kind of weird, but I always wished that they would call me Mai.
Oh.
And so there was this group of, we call them FOBs. And so FOB is an acronym for FOB. So fresh off the boat.
Yeah.
And so there's a TV show on ABC called
Fresh Off the Boat.
Fresh Off the Boat. And so that's where they taken it from. And so my family, my mom's side came off of a boat. And so as a kid, we'd always call them FOBs. And it was a derogatory term. And I think I was the only one that was American born that wanted to be friends with the FOBs. And so growing up, I wished they would call me Mai, which was just unheard of because that's an insult. But they would call each other Mai, and then they would just call me John.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was kind of sad, and I wanted to be part of, I wanted to be the ultimate hybrid, is I wanted to be friends with both of them, the fresh off the boat kids and then fresh off the American soil kids.
Yeah.
And so it never really came to fruition until I became an adult. And so at our church, we have a youth group. And so if you become a youth group leader, the kids call it red scarves now, and so it's modeled off of kind of like
Boy Scouts.
And so when I became a red scarf, that's when they started to call me Mai. And so it took years and years, but I finally achieved acceptance from the FOBs, and so I was very proud that I got to be both. I never struggled with cultural identity as other people do, but for a lot of kids they did. And so growing up, there was a lot of crime that happened, and so refugees come over to America, generally poor, not accepted, kind of outcasted, and so they look to be to have a group, to have friendship and kinship with others, and so there were a lot of I wouldn't say a lot, but there were a number of Vietnamese gangs that arose in the 90s where kids that were quote unquote fobs, that's a derogatory term, but we're just going to use it anyway. But they kind of flocked together. And so I think in a lot of American culture, especially like Hispanics as well, is that whenever they come over here, they kind of group and they band together. And so a lot of them ended up, in a life of crime, and so they grew up in abject poverty. There's a group of it's called subsidized housing in Denver, and it's pretty famous. It's on 26th and Osceola in Denver, and so a lot of Vietnamese refugees, they lived in subsidized housing, and that was part of, I think they call it like the Sisters of Mercy. And so it's actually a Catholic-run charity in which they provide subsidized housing. And so a lot of Vietnamese refugees live there, and so including multiple family members from my side as well. And so, the culture shock and the identity crisis is real. It's not just something that psychologists made up. And so kind of trying to fit in. Am I American? Am I Vietnamese? Am I Vietnamese American? Am I American Vietnamese? Is something that a lot of people do struggle with. I have a Western first name. My legal name is John. My last name is Nguyen. I have a Vietnamese middle name, Thai, and so I am the amalgamation of the American melting pot, and so but I think it benefited me to grow up in this hybrid Prius kind of culture, and I think it benefited me greatly, and it's something that I never struggled with personally, but a lot of kids did. And
Yeah,
so,
I was one of those kids. I remember just like, because when you were like earlier in the youth group, our community was quite big. I remember our youth group was like 1,000 kids strong. So like it was a lot of Vietnamese kids. But I think it was just so interesting because we all kind of, at least from my generation, from my age group, like again, I'm like 20 years after you. So you were my youth group leader when you were in the 20s, and I was still like a little kid. But it was like we all grew up in different parts of Colorado, different kind of like socioeconomic statuses, and we all kind of grew up in different areas, and we all kind of had. But the thing I noticed was like it was just that cultural identity crisis a little bit, because I remember, at least for me, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood, so all my friends at school were Caucasian, like everyone I knew was Caucasians, and I was comfortable around that area, and I felt like I was being pulled between two, because at school everything I learned was like about American history. All my friends had these relationships with their parents that I never had with my parents. And, I was in earlier podcasts, like my friends calling their parents by their first names. I've never even like thought about calling my dad and my mom by their first name ever. And it's just a different culture and I would go home and my parents always remind me, you're Vietnamese. Remember that. Never forget you're Vietnamese. And then I go to school and then I was keep being reinforced, you're American. And it was a big identity crisis for sure for a while. And it drove me to do a lot of weird stuff. Like I did a lot of things to fit in. I remember at school, I hated, like my mom would pack me delicious lunches. It'd be like delicious Vietnamese fried rice, these delicious soups, noodles, whatever. And I was so ashamed of it. I was like, no, like I remember opening one time, they're like, oh, all the kids like, it smells so stinky because of the fish sauce, but it was delicious. And at that point I would actually trade away my food for like the school lunches, like the crappy school lunches, like the school pizza or something like that, the hot dogs, so I can just fit in. I remember that. I remember those things, but I think now as I gotten older, my assimilation has gotten better and my identity is kind of more developed, and I realized, who I am and who God called me to be. And I think for me, the faith really helped me form that. And so I'm not sure if like what was the faith like for you when having your parents be, immigrants and you being first generation, and especially your parents coming from Vietnamese Catholicism, where the church over there is a lot different, right? There's a lot more structure. Well, it's not more structure. It's more rooted in tradition, and it's very rigid. And so what was the faith life for you growing up with your family?
Mhm. So my folks always told me when I was a kid that there's a saying in my family is that dù tao bị mất nước, okay, tụi bay sẽ không bao giờ mất gốc. Okay, so what that means is, even though that I lost my country, you will never lose your roots. And so, as a kid, my mom was a school teacher back in Vietnam, and so they used corporal punishment. And I just found out. The side note: in the state of Mississippi, you teachers are allowed to hit your children.
Wow.
Yeah, with parental permission. Yeah,
Wow.
they still do that. And so, random side note, but my mom was a school teacher in Vietnam, and so as kids, if we spoke English inside the house, she would go after us with a fly swatter. And so, I'm thinking next year's Christmas gift to my mom is I want to get her a really nice fly swatter because that's what she would hit us with. And so that was our spanking tool, is to discipline her children.
Weapon of choice.
Weapon of choice. And so it wasn't necessarily the pain that came from the fly swatter. It was the excrement of dead flies that had accumulated on her fly swatter.
Oh.
And so every time she would hit us with it, I could feel all of the fly guts just like smearing on the back of my rear end and the back of my thigh, just being ingrained and just kind of like seeping into my skin. And so my mom would literally discipline us if we spoke English inside the house. And so even though we are American born, my siblings and I are fluent in Vietnamese. We can read and write as well. And part of that is my parents not wanting to lose their cultural identity through their children as well. And so that, and I think, Catholicism, specifically in other countries, is a lot more, like you said, rigid and more strict than I would say in America. And so my upbringing was very traditional and just kind of not making exceptions, like not eating meat during Lent. And so, here in America, I think the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops has given out guidelines of 14 years old. And that for us, that was like since we were born. Like if you were 2 years old, you didn't eat meat, and it was just part of the discipline, of the religious upbringing. But I think mine was a little bit different. My mom actually grew up Buddhist, having they would call it like no religion in Vietnam. They would say like không có đạo, means that you don't have religion. And so like my family is they on my mom's side practices Buddhism, but it's not like they're not, like regular practicing. And so that was a little bit different. And so again, I really appreciate my upbringing. And so half my family was Buddhist and half my family was Catholic. And so I got another Prius hybrid experience, growing up with a gasoline engine and electric engine as well. And so, but my dad was the disciplinarian head of household. And so we definitely grew up Catholic. And so we never missed Mass. I've actually never taken a sick day. Sunday Mass,
Wow.
I've attended every single one. Even if we had a fever, like I was throwing up in a bag, it didn't matter. My dad was like, Sunday morning, you were going to mass. We always go 15 minutes early. He turned back all the clocks. I do that now. All my clocks in my house are 15
My
minutes
parents
fed.
still do that to
Yeah.
this day. Yep.
So we'd always arrive to church early. We would never miss, no matter what. And so that was part of my upbringing. And I have a fascinating story of how we made it to the Vietnamese church. And so we grew up poor. My parents came later on in life, and so we grew up in a very ethnic neighborhood. I grew up in a suburb in Denver called Montbello, and so a very ethnically diverse, and so abject poverty was pretty rampant as well. And so uh, that was part of my upbringing. And so we eventually moved to Aurora, which is even a greater melting pot of different cultures. And so on my 7th birthday, during this time, we just attended a church that was closest to us. And so um, my 7th birthday, I had a birthday party. And so um, after my birthday party, there was a girl. I forget her name. We were all 7 years old. She came up and she gave me a hug, and then she kissed me on the cheek and she said, "Happy birthday, John." And so my parents saw that and were just absolutely mortified. And so
Because she wasn't Vietnamese.
because she wasn't Vietnamese and because she wasn't Vietnamese Catholic. And so at 7 years old, my parents had the talk with me about relationships and life. And so um, they sat around and then they had the talk with me. They said, "John, bố mẹ nghĩ là người Mỹ cũng tốt. Không có phải là bất cứ người Mỹ nào cũng xấu đâu. Mà bố mẹ nghĩ là con nên lớn lên, con gặp được một cô gái người Việt Nam Công giáo nó tốt hơn. Và cuộc sống của con nó sẽ dễ hơn." And so basically they told me at 7 years old that, we're not racist, even though they were. And people of all faiths and cultures are good, but we think that if you marry a Vietnamese Catholic girl, your life will be so much easier. And so they told a 7-year-old that. And so we lived about 45 minutes away from a all Vietnamese Catholic church. And so my parents decided that they would make this trek every single Sunday, and they've done it ever since for 32 years, is to drive their kids to an all Vietnamese Catholic church so that they could experience part of their culture. And so I tried to fight it as best as I could, and eventually for 32 years they were right. And so I ended up marrying a Vietnamese Catholic girl. And it wasn't for me, it wasn't for lack of trying to go completely opposite of what my parents have told me when I was 7. I'm 43 now, and so they were right, and I didn't want to admit it, and I still don't want to admit it now that my parents were right about anything. But they set out a foundation for me at 7 years old because a little white girl had given me a peck on the cheek, and they decided to change their lives. And so they decided that they would embark on this journey too. And so rain or snow, whether the kids were sick or not, my parents would drive 45 minutes across the state of Colorado to the Queen of Vietnamese Martyrs Catholic Parish in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, rain or shine. And they've done it every single Sunday for the past 32 years. And, it's bettered their lives. It's bettered my life. And so, yeah, I'm kind of thankful. I can't remember which girl it was when I was 7. It was all just a big blur to me as a kid, but I kind of have to thank her for it because if not, I think my life would be a lot different. I wouldn't have embraced my culture. Like you said, I was afraid and ashamed of, the great smelling foods that are there that my mom packed for me. And so, having a lot more wisdom and hindsight now. I bring all the stinkiest, smellingest foods to the office that I can.
You're that guy.
Yeah, and I am that guy now. Like I will light up the company microwave like none other. Like I give no flying farts about how offended you are about the smell. One of my favorite fruits is called durian, and it has a very pungent smell. So pungent that I brought it into the office one day, and somebody called the fire department because they thought there was a gas leak in the office. And so now having that bit of experience and hindsight, it's something that I'm very proud of. My culture, my heritage, my last name, my middle name. I'm appreciative of my parents of giving me, a westernized first name so that people can call and talk to me and to address me without having reservations. And so that part of assimilation, I actually really appreciate. I was actually named after Saint John, the youngest disciple of Jesus, but it helped bridge the culture gap and having a first name that was easily pronounceable, even though the last name is a bit, a curveball to most people. But now I embrace it. I'm very proud of my culture, my heritage. My parents have never been back to Vietnam since 1975.
My parents haven't either.
Yeah. So that part of the culture they don't embrace, and so they have this deep rooted resentment of how their life was uprooted. And so my dad has this saying là mấy thằng cộng sản nó sẽ không có ăn một đồng xu của tao hết. So my dad doesn't want to contribute one single penny to the communist government of Vietnam because they uprooted his life. Even though I know for a fact that his life is so much better now being in America than it would have been in Vietnam, but who knows, And so he probably would become a priest and his life would be so much different.
And you wouldn't be here.
And I wouldn't be here. And so he still he carries a lot of resentment, and I think a lot of people that are refugees still do. They carry it with them. And so growing up, I never actually went to Vietnam. So from actually 2 years ago was the first time I actually went to Vietnam. And so for 41 years of my life, I knew nothing about the motherland. I have culturally, and I've always considered myself American. And so I call myself American Vietnamese, not Vietnamese American, because I literally knew nothing about Vietnam and growing up. And so my parents, they refused to take us there. And so even though I knew how to read, write, and speak the language and could relate to people, but it wasn't relatable for me. And so as an adult, I went. It was one of the most eye-opening and enjoyable experiences of my life. But culturally, I'm an American. I bleed red, white, and blue.
Yeah, and that's the same for me too. Like I always say, hey, like people are asked like where you're from, and that's one thing. I'm just like,
my favorite.
I'm just like, I was born and raised here in Colorado. I'm from Colorado. Then they're always like, no, like where are you from? Like I'm like from Colorado, and they're like,
what I love most is they're like, where are you from?
Oh yeah, from. I'm like, well, my parents are from Vietnam. I'm from Colorado. I'm an American. Like that's how I've identified myself. I'm American first. Like no matter what, I'm American first, and then I'm Vietnamese. It's funny growing up. My parents always brought back what happened in Vietnam. Right? They always like, this is how I grew up. This is what I did. I'm like, I don't know a single thing of. I can like try to imagine what you went through and like the things you grew up with, but I don't know. Like my hardest day, to be honest, was like trying to fit in at school, or like, what Sally Sue thought of me in like the 8th grade. That was one of my difficulties. My parents had a very different background. So it's hard for me to like, how do you say it? Empathize and really just try to put myself in their shoes and what they're going through. It takes a little bit. And, after some mission work and kind of going through some truly experiencing third world poverty, understanding that, but like even till this day, like I can never truly fully understand that. And so it's just very interesting in that sense. And I always consider myself like, like being born here, I'm an American first, and then Vietnamese is second. I'm an American who happens to have Vietnamese. My parents' family is from Vietnam. Yeah, it's very interesting that. But I want to go back a little bit. Go back a little bit about some of the reasons why maybe your parents have some of the things they still hold true in tradition in their heart, and some of the maybe the rootedness of their everyday traditions and what they hold and what they want to keep doing, or some of the things that affect them to this day. And maybe to look at like why, like for example, like why do they have to go to the Vietnamese church, right? Why they stuck to what they knew without that was good, and they stuck to that for 30 plus years. And I think that's could come from like the craziness and the drama of the war, right? Because like the war in itself, I know 1975 happened. That was just like kind of like the marker where Vietnam, like the South, ended, but everything leading up to that was just craziness, right? Like did your parents ever tell you about like what the war was like the fighting and what they experienced on an everyday basis?
My parents never really talked about it. I wish they would. They would. So my youngest sister, Cece, she had I think it was a genealogy class in college, and so she tried to do like a family tree and to sit down, and so it's just I don't know, like mental health and talking about feelings and things like that are kind of taboo in the Asian culture, and so sitting down and kind of letting all your feelings out and telling people how you feel is not really an accepted part of the culture. And so my parents never talked about their struggles until, my youngest sister actually kind of pried it out of them. And so I'm sure it's pretty traumatic, seeing dead bodies and things like that. And so like my mom's journey was a little bit harsher. People just dying everywhere, like just stepping over dead bodies. Um, she was a young person in her 20s as well. And so, she's carried that trauma with her. There's stories of people being robbed in refugee camps, people leaving, people dying, dead bodies everywhere. I get bits and pieces from aunts and uncles, but literally nobody really wants to talk about it. And I wish they would. I really enjoyed there's a PBS documentary done by Ken Burns about the Vietnam War. It's like a 12 episode, and I've literally memorized the entire documentary because I didn't get that experience from my family, and like I learned it through the Zeiss lens of Ken Burns more than my own family. I have an encyclopedia of this wealth of knowledge, and I have historians that are still alive, but they don't talk about it. And so mental health and, talking about feelings is just not done in my family. And I think it's pretty across the board in most Asian cultures. And so I feel like I'm missing out on a lot of history. And so, people are always like, well, why do we need to learn about this stuff? And so I teach Vietnamese language arts at the church. And so we call it QVM, and so Queen of Vietnamese Martyrs. So if I use that acronym, at QVM, they have on Sunday school, we have 3 different programs that the kiddos go through. And so one is religious ed, one is the youth group, and then the other one is Vietnamese language arts. And so right now I teach a class. I teach 2 classes. So the youth group is a course, and then the other one is the Vietnamese language arts. And so the kids don't understand, like, why do I care about the war? Why do I care about that? Because it didn't happen to me. And so what's nice is in my class, we have a good group of kiddos that were actually born in Vietnam who immigrated after. And then we have kiddos who are American born, and they literally do not care, either one of them. And so we learned about the Southern Vietnamese flag, which is completely different, and it's actually outlawed in Vietnam now. And so none of the kids knew what it was, and so they actually didn't want to learn about it. The kids that were born in America and the kids that were born in Vietnam completely disconnected from what happened. And it's just they're in the same generation, but they were born in different countries. And there's this huge disconnect. And so I felt like it's my responsibility to enlighten and share this incredible journey of horrific human suffering, to have the kids understand that they are so damn lucky to either be born or immigrate to the greatest country in the history of mankind, where we have freedom and we have laws and people follow the laws and law enforcement and rules and the rule of law, and you're pronounced innocent until proven guilty. And these are just, we take them for granted. They're like, these are basic rights. No, they're not. On the other side of the world, they don't exist. And being in this country is a privilege. It absolutely is. And I'm so thankful and grateful to be born here, and to not, we think of them as rights, but people earn them through blood to have these rights and freedoms, and to breathe, clean and fresh air. These things don't exist on the other side of the planet. You don't know how lucky you have it to be an American, to be born here, to have all of these great and wonderful things.
Oh yeah. And just to kind of put a little more light and talk a little bit more about the Queen of Vietnamese Martyrs Parish. I know that there was a lot of Vietnamese people that came over, and they were displaced all throughout the country. Southern California has a huge population, over 1 million people, Vietnamese people, and it's a huge concentration. Same thing in Houston. And all across the country, there's pockets of Vietnamese people. But I want to look at more of our community a little bit here in Denver. The Queen of Vietnamese Martyrs Parish is a very unique parish, right? Where it's built by those who first immigrated here, right? By those who fled a war-torn country, experienced some pretty horrific things, experienced just horrific and traumatizing things from war, but leaving that all behind and coming to a new place, not knowing the language, not having any money, and working from the ground up to build a church. And so I remember like we were doing, when you were youth group president, we were doing this like 30-year anniversary or something like that of the youth group, and looking back at the parish and just learning a little about the history. Like it was cool to see like to see those individuals come and build the church. Because back in the day, this was like in the late 70s, early 80s, right? Where safety regulations was, it was there, but it was loose. And so maybe like you experienced it. Like, what was it like growing up and actually going to the church and what is it like building it from the ground up?
And so the original Catholic Vietnamese community started at, I think it was Our Lady of Presentation in Denver. And so that church was kind of borrowed. And so the community wanted to have their own church and a place of their own. And so they went and asked the archdiocese, and it was approved. And so the group of ragtag refugees founded, it was called the Twin Lakes movie theater in Wheat Ridge, Colorado. And so they found a desolate and abandoned property that's across from Lakeside Amusement Park. And so the land was cheap. And so that was the main thing. It was a community of, poor refugees with no money. And so they found the cheapest dirt lot that they could possibly find. And so it was literally an abandoned movie theater, and they bought it. And so they pulled together money, and they had to renovate because it was abandoned. And so the church still stands today, but it's actually a movie theater. And so people would go to work, and then they would come after work and on the weekends, and they would renovate the church. And so again, no money, no experience, just ragtag just an army of refugees just sitting around and renovating and building a church. And like you said, there were pretty lax code back then, I guess. And so they would just let random people just build a building. And so I guess, whether or not it met code or not, the church is still standing today. And so the grandmas and the old people and the refugees, they all, I don't know, their build quality is pretty impressive.
Oh,
If
yeah.
the building still stands today with just, little old grandmas.
Yeah, and it's like bare minimum maintenance. Like I've seen the infrastructure of that building. I'm like, you can clearly tell it's an old movie theater. Like the choir loft used to be where, like, the projector was,
Yeah.
and the altar is where the screen was, and
Yep.
all the rows. Like, oh okay, this is an old, for sure, an
Yeah.
old single movie theater. But yeah, it's just seeing that, but also just like understanding that, like, this was a community thing, right? Brought together as, hey, we've lost our country, right? We've lost our country, and we're in a new country now. But we still want to have the community, but we also want a place where we can worship, truly worship, and worship how we know, like how we were taught to worship. And I think that, like, that was such a beautiful testament where people coming in after work, bringing in their children, little babies. Like, I've heard stories of moms just sitting out there outside while the dads are out there working, pouring concrete and whatnot, and they're just sitting there with their babies building this church. And it was just like such a testament to, like, their love for God, but also their desire for community. And it's a very, very moving thing to see the pictures too. Because again, I saw some of these pictures. I saw little kids carrying blocks of concrete, carrying bricks, and they're up there with their dads on the roof. And I'm like, this couldn't happen nowadays for sure. But like, it's just such a community thing. And it's probably cool for you to see it change from that basic, movie theater lot all the way to what it is today, and still being a part of it today. It's just like, I remember growing up in there where there was just so much change that happened when I was going through there, when I first went there, and just seeing how vibrant the community was. But one thing that amazed me was, like, all the work that took for a Sunday to happen. There's so much going on in the parish life. And the crazy thing to me was that no one at the parish was paid except for the secretary or the business manager. Everything done at the parish is all volunteer based. There's, good and bad that comes from that for sure, but everything was volunteer based. People had such a love for the community, but also a love for Christ to, like, do that with the community. I remember seeing just old ladies every weekend, like, cooking. Like, they spend all week cooking and working their day jobs, but then on the weekends they come at night. And they just cook all day and cook for the community, so they can fundraise, get some money. And it's such a very unique perspective for me. And I try to explain to my wife this, who grew up, she grew up Lutheran but converted in college, but, like, didn't really experience something like this. So when she goes there, she just sees she's amazed because, like, there's so many moving pieces, and all of this done pretty much of, like, like, in the goodness of your heart, and trying to do charity for Christ. Yeah, it's just a very, very beautiful thing. And, like, our youth group was kind of the same way. And it's just, I look back on it and I'm just amazed at where we are today. And today we have our struggles, right? Like, there is definitely some of the struggles, what you were saying before. Like, when you're trying to explain some of these histories, like, why do we ever need this? And specifically the Vietnamese language. I think I'm one of the only handful of, like, Vietnamese, younger generations who's, like, in their 30s, like early 30s, mid 20s, who can actually speak the language fluently and actually understand and have a conversation with, the older folks. And it's that where I think nowadays, like, people are like, why do I need the language? Why do I need the history? Like, what is the point of this? Like, I go to school, I'm in America. We should be America. Like, I'm just learning this to learn it. I don't know why I'm learning it. And it's that thing too. And sadly, I think also it kind of goes back to trickles down to the faith too, right? Mm-hmm. Do you see that where it's just more of like, why do we even need to learn the faith? Like, I like, growing up, you probably experienced it, right? And John, where, like, the faith passed down in the Vietnamese culture was very much so, like, you do this, you do that. This is how you pray. This is how you chant. This is how you pray in mass. I remember going to mass for 20 plus years and didn't understand the order of mass. Didn't understand what they were saying, but it was all in Vietnamese. Like what was that like? Did you see that, and what was that experience for you? Like just getting indoctrinated, or like not indoctrinated, but like learning the faith in that lens.
Mhm. So at the beginning of this podcast, I'd mentioned that it's all about perspective,
Uh-huh.
and so um, I wouldn't be thankful without perspective of having cancer. And so it same thing about learning your history and your culture, your heritage and your faith as well. And so to answer your question, why do we need to learn history? Why do you need to know something about where you came from? Why do you need to know something about your faith? And it's called perspective. And if you don't, you will never have it. And so sometimes, I teach catechism to kids. And so they're like, well, why do I need to learn about the Bible? What are a bunch of old bearded Jewish guys 2,000 years ago has nothing to do with me. And I tell them, well, did you read it? And they're like, no, it's a big, giant, old, dusty book. Of course I didn't read it. The thing is, like, it does give you perspective. And so growing up, I had a falling out with my dad. And so I lived the story of the prodigal son, and I asked to come back home, and my dad was happy to have me back. He didn't give me a ring, and he didn't slaughter the greatest tasting calf and throw a party for me, but perspective. I got it because I learned the history, and I learned from reading scripture, and for faith and for culture, for heritage, the language, and all of that. And so the quote unquote younger generation, they don't see it, but once you hit that epiphany in your life, and once you hit that low point in your life, that's when you gain perspective. And so why do we learn history too? Is to not repeat the mistakes of the past, to learn from the prodigal son. My relationship with my dad's a little rocky still, but we're good. We're good. And so I think every man has a rocky relationship with their father. And so just to say, but, learning from a bunch of bearded Jewish guys 2,000 years ago, it did give me perspective, And so I growing up as a teen or as a young adult, I didn't treat my family very well at times. And so, the story goes that you go and you apologize to your father, and your father will always forgive you, your father in heaven or your father on this earth. And so, that was my perspective. I was a turd of a son. At the time I didn't know it. And, and I apologized to my dad, and he was like, okay, great, come on home, And so he's like, this is your house, when I die, it's yours, And so it's in a will, it's in a legal document. I've signed it, and so, it's his house, but metaphorically, it's just like, this is your house as much as it is mine. And so, my dad was like, you're always welcome back. And so it's meaningful. And so same thing with, I'm an American. I have an appreciation for, what the American dream and what American culture is all about. But I also have an appreciation of my parents' culture and where they came from. And so I try to raise my children in that atmosphere as well. And so, especially with their faith, again, like you said, kiddos these days, they're like, I don't need this, and it's all about being a cafeteria Catholic and picking and choosing what I want to believe in. And I don't like this. I'm a part-time Catholic, but I believe in abortion, and I pick and choose what I want to, I'll vote this way, but then I'll vote the other way. And, I think that's part of the American culture as well, is having freedom. and you should be able to have freedom of choice, and so, but I think some people have just kind of taken it too liberally and just thought that, you know what, because I have too much freedom, okay, that I pick and choose the wrong path, and what is, cool, and what other kids are doing, I can do that too. Abortion's okay, this and that is okay. But yeah, it shaped my life, and it's made me a better person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to go off what you said, I want to second that, because I think a lot of the perseverance I've learned, and I have now, and just kind of like the having the questions, but also kind of having that like, hey, I may not have the best relationship now, but the perseverance with Christ and perseverance in general, I've learned that through the church. I remember just started going to daily mass and just seeing like there's a big group of old Vietnamese women that go there every day. They go to daily mass every day. Their faith is unbroken. They've experienced and some crazy things. They've had some crazy things in their lives. They have things happening here in the United States too. But every day, no matter what, they give glory to God. And they always come back and say that this is my faith and this is my perseverance. And some things they see on the news, they see out there that's going on and they don't agree with, but they still always come back to the root and it's like, hey, glory to God no matter what. And oftentimes too, like I see a lot of these older Vietnamese ladies or even older Vietnamese gentlemen, right? They come and they work really hard for the community. They do all these things and they go to mass. But I realize they're also not educated. Majority of them have, the most bare basic education. But I see the faith in them is so beautiful because they say, you know what? This is the truth. I know this is the truth. And, I may not know a lot, but this is the truth. And I'm going to stick to it. I'm going to stay strong with it and fight for it to the very end and do what I can to help further the church, but also further this community. And till my last breath, I will do that. And I've seen like people give everything to the church. It's so much of their lives to the church, and they pass away and they just pass it on to their kids. And it's just very interesting to see where the church is now. And it's a very beautiful community, but it definitely is changing. It definitely is getting smaller, right? Because times are changing, and I think the work ethic is a little different nowadays, and the desires to spend countless amount of hours at the church is not there. But it's still there, and God is still present, ever present there. So that's really beautiful. But John, thank you so much for hopping on today. I think it's just really just good to have a perspective of someone who is a first generation American, and just to see like looking back and having that perspective, and looking and saying like, hey, like I'm so thankful to be here. I'm so thankful to have this. Like my life could be totally different. Your life could be totally different if our parents didn't come over here. We can be in a much worse spot and we wouldn't even know. But just looking back in the perspective and understanding like, embracing where we came from, what we had, but what we have now. It truly is beautiful. So thank you so much, and John. Before we end today, do you mind leading us in a closing prayer?
Yeah, no problem. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Dear Lord, help us see that we have blessings everywhere in life. And although sometimes it may be hard to see them, please help us open our eyes, open our hearts to see all those blessings that you have bestowed upon us. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you again, and John.
Yeah,
and
thank you for having me.
I hope the Seahawks destroy the Patriots. I'm sorry. I just have to say that. But thank you so much again to all our listeners out there. Thank you again for tuning in. Please check us out again on YouTube for additional content. And also, please follow us on social media to keep up to date what's going on. Thank you so much. Grab a cup and remember that God is good.